Hello, and welcome to the start of a very long project in which I read every single book mentioned in the Feminist Book Club Essential Reading Guide. So I will have timestamps linked down below in the description if you want to jump around, but I want to introduce this project because I have been hinting in a couple of my previous videos about this very long project that I'm doing, and I've sort of hinted that it has to do with reading a bunch of feminist books, and yes, here we are. I'm very excited. I have been putting off filming this video for quite a while because I have been kind of terrified. But here we are. I'm finally getting around to filming it, and we're gonna first start off by talking about why I'm doing this, what the books are, what this whole reading guide even is, my whole plans for this project. We're gonna get into all of it. And the second part of this video will actually be me talking about the very first page in this guide. And I say the very first page, it's like the unofficial first page, I suppose. We'll get into it. Again, I'm excited, I'm a little nervous, but here we are. Let's get into it, I suppose. So I stumbled upon this reading guide because I was looking up the Feminist Book Club book box. This is unfortunately not sponsored by them. I was just very intrigued by this. I do not have a subscription to them. I was sort of just checking out their website, seeing what they were all about. I heard about them on Instagram because I follow a bookstagrammer who is affiliated with them, and so book boxes aren't really my thing. I'm not that into them. So yeah, I was kind of just on their website looking at stuff, and I saw that if you put in your email, you would get a reading guide. And honestly, I was just kind of intrigued. I like reading guides. I like just things about books. So I decided I would put in my email and check out this reading guide. And obviously it intrigued me enough to start an entire project around it. So yeah, here we are. So I plan on making a video going through each page of this reading guide. Yeah, we will get into what each of these pages are, but that is my plan, to make one video dedicated to each page of this guide. Maybe at the end of this series, I would love to come up with my own reading guide, just because I have looked at all the books that are on this reading guide, obviously, and I feel like there are some on here. There are some that are not on here that I have just seen at bookstores and out in the wild on the internet, that I feel like could be on here. Obviously, I haven't read those books, but I kind of want to explore some feminist literature, maybe make my own guide at the end of this. As I go through each page, I might tell you which ones I think are worth your time, which ones aren't, my personal opinions on them, all of that good stuff. And yeah, I have been putting this off for a while, so I will just say that I have started working on the second page of this guide already, and already I have this new idea that maybe I will actually tell you if the books mentioned on here, if I would actually put them in that grouping on the page. But, that just might be a bit of some spicy content coming in the next video, I suppose. No slander to this guide. I think it's really great. It's just with page 2, I have some thoughts on one of the book, but again, that'll come later. Okay, so I feel like giving some background on, feminism, I guess. Obviously, I am interested in feminism. I watch a lot of feminist booktube content, not booktube content, just YouTube content in general. I guess booktube content as well. I would like to say that I'm very intentional with the people that I follow. But I feel like as I get older, I'm getting more and more into politics, and obviously feminism is a political issue. So I've been more interested in nonfiction and learning more, I suppose. So I feel like reading more feminist literature is exactly something that like I want to do. It's combining my love of books with my new found passion for like politics and like, I don't know, watching feminist content. I don't know. So yeah, obviously I saw this guide, I was intrigued. I would love to read all of these books. That's the plan, obviously, but especially in these times, I don't know if it's just because I'm more aware of the things going on, but I don't know. With the overturning of Roe v. Wade, I feel like everything has gotten like more in my face. I want to learn more about it. I want to have like thoughtful opinions on everything going on, I suppose. I'm a woman. I live in the red state of Florida. Yeah, I feel like I have a lot of thoughts. I just don't know how like educated they are. And so I just really want to learn more, I suppose. So yeah, that's kind of the background, I suppose, on me, on this project. Like my mental headspace going into this, I feel like I don't know enough. Like I can obviously call myself a feminist without knowing like the entire history of the feminist movement and all that. It obviously wasn't something I learned in school, besides like the fact that women had to fight for the right to vote. That was pretty much the extent to it. I think I read the Yellow Wallpaper in like 11th grade, but really I didn't learn too much about stuff, which is not surprising here in Florida, but yeah. So yeah, I've gotten older, I've got new interest, I want to learn more, and here we are. I hope to learn a lot. I have learned a lot. I read quite a few of these books already, but yeah, that's kind of the whole goal of this. I want to learn, maybe you want to learn, maybe you'll come along on this venture with me, I don't know, but I'm very excited for this project. Okay, so let's move on to how I'm structuring this. I already said I was going to dedicate one video to every single page in this guide, but I just want to let you know that I am using the guide that was last updated in May of 2023. I don't know when they're going to update this again. I did just very recently, I think like a month ago, download it. So May of 2023 is the last time it was updated, to my knowledge. If it gets updated again, then you know that the guide I'm going off of is the May 2023 one. So yeah, I wanted to throw that out there. But now let's go through each page very briefly, just like what they're covering, I suppose. So the first one, and the one I'll be talking in the second half of this video, is what I'm calling comprehensive feminist writings. And this is like the unofficial first page, where it just talks about two books that are both delving into feminist writings. I'll talk about these more in the later half of this video, so I don't want to say too much, but I titled this one myself and I threw this one in here just because I wanted to. But on to like the official pages of this guide, we have foundational feminist nonfiction, and this is where the further reading section starts. So I just want to throw it out there very briefly that these further reading sections get quite a lot, and you'll probably see that as I put like the pages up on the screen and stuff, but I will not be talking about the further reading sections in these dedicated page videos. I will actually be doing a separate video over on Patreon. I've been wanting to start a Patreon, and I feel like this is the perfect way to do that. Links down in the description. I'll keep it brief. Yeah, so the day after I post this page for foundational feminist nonfiction, the day after will be when that video on Patreon goes live. So I'll have like the whole meat and potatoes of this page go live on YouTube, and the further reading sections the day after over on Patreon. So even if you don't want to support me on Patreon or don't have the means to, you still like get the page itself. But if you want some extra content, some extra books, hear me talking about more books, you can definitely head over there and check out those further reading section videos if you would like to. But yeah, I'll keep that very brief. So let's go on to some of the other pages. We have Feminism Leveled Up, and then we have Memoir and a second page of memoirs. Lots of memoirs, very excited. We have short story collections, we have a whole sci-fi and fantasy page, a romance page, a contemporary fiction page, historical fiction, and mystery thriller. I will say mystery thriller and historical fiction, not genres that I'm particularly interested in, but I do think that it's good to get out of your comfort zone. I didn't know that I liked nonfiction until I started reading more of it, so maybe by reading these books that are a part of this guide, I'll find new books that I normally wouldn't have picked up, and I'll end up enjoying them and stuff, and maybe those genres will become new favorites of mine. I don't know. But yeah, then we get to some giant pages, and we have classics that still hold up, which is a lot of books. And then we have previously featured books. So these are all of the books that were previously featured in the Feminist Book Club monthly book box. So yeah, the majority of these books I will be getting from my library. I do not have the money to buy all of these books, but yeah, I'm very excited. I really am hoping to find some really good books, pick up some ones that I normally wouldn't have. Just, I don't know, find new books. I don't know. But for these giant pages, I will probably split them up, or you'll just get a ginormous video from me. I don't know, that will be very far in the future because there are a lot of books to read. So I guess we'll just see how things go when we get to those pages. But yes, I am so excited for this project. I hope you guys are too. So yeah, let me know if you guys are excited in the comments and everything. But those are the pages. That's my whole plan for this project. Those are a sneak peek at the books I'll be reading and everything. And yeah, if you have any feminist books or books that have feminist themes or that you would consider very feminist books, I don't know, leave them in the comments, especially if they aren't on this guide. I'm very curious. Again, I want to do my whole own guide at the end of this, and yeah, I'm excited, I'm nervous, but okay. Let's just get into the second half of this video in which I talk about the comprehensive feminist writings page. Yeah, I'm actually gonna take a break before getting into that because it's a bit long. I've been talking for a bit, kind of just rambling on, but yeah, I'm excited. I'll be back. All right, I am here. I have calmed down a bit. I'm a little less nervous. And we're going to get into this first page. I called this comprehensive feminist writings, feminist readings, I don't know. So there's only 2 books featured on this page, and that is Women's Liberation and Feminist Thought. Now, I cannot read Feminist Thought by Rosemary Tong because I think it's actually a textbook. I am not able to get this through any of my 5 libraries. I do have 5 different library cards. And I cannot get it off of Libro.fm. I can't find it anywhere. I found it on Amazon, except it was $50, and I am not paying $50. It's not gonna happen. I'm not paying $50 for one book. That's a little too insane, and I do not have the money for that. But I was able to get a copy of Women's Liberation through my library. So, let's get into this book. Well, actually, first let's talk about why I named this section Comprehensive Feminist Readings, and that is because both of these books are essays and newspaper articles and speeches and stuff, all by feminist women throughout history, and so we get a whole timeline. And I feel Comprehensive Feminist Readings is exactly what it is. It's a whole bunch of different topics, a bunch of different feminist ideas from either side. I feel you get a lot of different perspectives, And women's liberation has a lot of different things in it. So yeah, again, essays, speeches, news stories. It has excerpts from like famous feminist books, such as The Feminist Mystique. That is one I will be talking about. But yeah, it's all about these different feminist writings that have shaped feminism and the movement as a whole throughout history. It was a very fascinating book. I will just throw out my rating right here. I gave this book 4 stars. I thought it was very fascinating to read. It's a book I hadn't heard of before seeing this guide and actually reading it. So yeah, I think if you're definitely interested in feminism and the history of feminism, this is one I would recommend that you check out. So yeah, this book, it talks about different works and it's sectioned like by decade. So that's kind of how I'm going to structure talking about it as well. Talking about some of the writings that stood out to me throughout each decade. But yeah, it touches on a lot of different topics. So it talks about sex, queerness, bodily autonomy, motherhood, birth control, how to support other women, politics, abortion, and just so many topics. I think this book does a really good job of bringing in different writings from minority women, a lot of BIPOC writers, a lot of queer women, and I think it does like a really good job of centering minority voices, even from what I could only perceive as being a time where minorities did not have a big voice, especially in something like feminism. They were, what I assume, fighting for a lot of different other rights. This book, I believe, starts in like the 50s and 60s. So obviously a lot of other things were going on, but I do like that this whole collection has many different viewpoints. So yeah, I think that was great. The only reason I didn't give it 5 stars is I feel like the authors who put this whole collection together centered only American voices, and I can understand that. However, the feminist movement is not a US-centric thing, and I think it would have been cool to have writings from other countries. And you know, I feel like even if you were just going to have it centering on the West, which is fine, I feel like you could at least still get out of the US, go to Canada, England, Australia, I don't know. But I feel like just centering it around the US kind of takes away some of its value in my opinion. But yeah, I don't know. That's kind of like my overall thoughts after finishing this book. But let's go throughout the decades. So it does start in the 1960s. The one I want to talk about is The Feminist Mystique by Betty Friedan. This is a very popular book. It is, if you had asked me before I started this project, like what book like embodied feminism, this is probably the one that I could actually name. And this is books that started like a whole new wave of feminism during the 60s. I do actually own a copy of this book. I have not read it, but Women's Liberation does excerpt the entire first chapter of this book. And I wanted to bring this one out just because reading this one, I can understand why it sparked this whole new wave of feminism. I do understand a lot of the critiques with this book just because it was very white feminism focused. However, I do also see, like, from the way it was written, it is very passionate, and I understand why it sparked a whole new movement. And I think reading this at the beginning of this collection really like set the tone and was really great, and I am very interested to actually read the entire book. However, it is like over 500 pages, so it's a bit daunting, but yeah, yeah, I don't know, it was a very insightful read. I definitely think it embodies the 1960s and what was going on, and yeah, that first chapter was very great, a very great start to women's liberation in this entire collection, I feel like. However, a different turn in the 60s was actually an excerpt from the Scum Manifesto, or the SCUM Manifesto. I don't know how you say it. I really need to look into this more. But this was a time reading this. I feel like in today's world, I feel like conservatives and like right-winged politicians like think feminism is everything that happened in like this excerpt. It was quite wild. I don't even know like if I can say a lot of things that were in this, but this is one that I definitely don't agree with. It's a very, very I hate men shouldn't exist type perspective on feminism. And I don't know, I do think it was very fascinating to read. It wasn't something I was expecting, especially in the 60s, but after reading it and after like reading more in this collection, I think that you have to like think about like the time that this was taking place and how like fed up women were getting with how they were being treated, that I guess, yeah, a lot of people would like resort to like extremist thinking. And yeah, I mean, it's sad to see that women felt this way, but I also, I guess, can kind of see why in a way. Yeah, I don't know. It was just a very interesting perspective, not one like that I was expecting at all. Definitely very extreme, not something I agree with, but it is one that has fascinated me. I think it's one, like out of all of these, had the biggest difference in perspective. It's one that I want to sort of read more about, like the context of how it came about and what like these women were thinking, doing. I don't know. It really intrigued me, I guess. So I kind of want to throw that in there just because it's a lot different from all the other ones. But I think those were the only two in the 60s that I really had any thoughts about or that really stood out to me. So we're just going to move on to the 1970s, and we have an excerpt from The Dialect of the Sex, and this one is all about love, romance, and sex, and how there's like this whole warped view of these things. So this one was very interesting. From this excerpt, it talks a lot about romanticism and how women romanticize things and how this can even play into the patriarchy and like different like stereotypes for men versus women, and it was very fascinating. It also discusses sex privatization, which was not a concept I was familiar with before reading about this, but it was interesting to see how that in itself stereotypes women. And yeah, I think this is like this whole excerpt was again about love and relationships and how like I don't know, there's a lot of differences between now and then, but I think a lot of them you can still see parallels to in our daily lives because a lot of the stereotypes are still around. And yeah, seeing like how this like affected women then is very interesting. So that was one I wanted to point out. Another one is a speech called The 51% Minority, and this was a speech given by the first African American Congresswoman, and I thought this was a very empowering speech. It's a whole speech about how you cannot just wish for change, that wishing for things doesn't make them happen. You actually need action in order to make things happen. And yeah, it's all about fighting for change. And yeah, it was a really empowering speech. It's definitely one that I'm glad to have read, especially for the 70s. It was interesting. So yeah, that was one I want to point out. Then we also have The Women Identified Women, and this is all about lesbians and their role in women's rights, which again, fascinating. All of these ones I'm pointing out were just ones that I found intriguing. But this one I wanted to point out because I don't have Twitter anymore. I haven't had Twitter for quite a few years now, or X. But one of the conversations, because on Twitter I was in a lot of queer spaces and there was a lot of conversations. It's also something like I've actually seen in like the real world, offline and stuff, but one of the conversations that I would see quite often is in a lesbian relationship, who's the man? Like the question of who's the man in the relationship, and how this is just playing into the patriarchy that two women, if they're in a relationship together, that one of them still has to be the man, that there always has to be a man in a relationship. And this like whole thing was all about that, and I thought that was very fascinating to read about. And it's interesting, like it talks a lot about how queer people in general are so used to these stereotypes and living in this that they sort of internalize this, that you know, your femme presenting lesbian has to be with a masc presenting lesbian, and how sometimes these are just internalized stereotypes that can be played into. And I don't know, it was just an interesting read. Yes, another one is sisterhood, and this was one that was all about how society is always pitting women against women, and this one was just discussing how women actually need to stand together, that we're a sisterhood, we all need to work together, we all are supposed to be helping to build each other up. We're all in this like messed up society and like structure that the only way to like dismantle it is to work together. And yeah, it talks a lot about like wanting male approval and everything, and yeah, I think it has a lot of parallels that like I see with I guess like in today's online terms of being like a pick-me girl, and how it's like this whole concept of women who just want male approval, male attention, especially online and stuff. And I feel like this whole reading just talks a lot about that, about how it's all internalized, and even if maybe we don't agree with these women and what they're doing, bringing them down for the way that they're acting isn't going to solve anything. We're all, you know, playing this game together, you know, trying to fix everything, and you know, bringing each other down won't help. And everything is all about like sticking together, working together, educating each other on everything. And I don't know, I really liked that one. And something that ends up happening around this time is that I start becoming familiar with some of these authors, which was really fun. But we have Alice Walker, who is the author of The Color Purple, and she wrote In Search of Our Mother's Garden, and this is talking about creativity of African American women, and it was a really good piece in this. And we also get Angela Davis, who I've only just recently read a book by and really enjoyed, and I do believe she is like on this whole like feminist book club reading guide for another book, so I will be reading her again at some point. But she is in this collection for her essay Joanne Little, which is all about self-defense against sexual harassment. And yeah, it was really fascinating, really great. So then we move on to the 80s and 90s, and by the early 90s I'm only specifically talking about 1990 and 1991 because that's as far as this collection goes. But yeah, so the beginning of this section was very intriguing. So we get multiple essays and speeches about adult entertainment, and I feel like this is definitely like a big shift, because I feel like what was talked about like in the 60s, you definitely wouldn't have seen talk about adult entertainment. But yeah, we definitely get a lot more of that, a lot of different back-to-back pieces in women's liberation about this from different perspectives. You know, some feminists believe that this kind of entertainment is really good, really empowering. And then you have some who don't, who believe it's playing into stereotypes, who believe it's playing into the male gaze, all of that stuff. And yeah, it was just very cool seeing like these pieces being like back to back and getting these different perspectives all at the same time. And yeah, I'm really glad that this collection like framed it in that way. So yeah. But during the 80s is when Indigenous women first started publishing essays and books, which obviously took a while. I think it's even something we see nowadays when they, when like you get to see like all the publishing stats. Indigenous women are not very well represented in publishing, so it's not too shocking that it took till the 80s for there to be the first publishing of them. But we get an excerpt of A Gathering of Spirit and Thoughts on Indian Feminism, which touches about, you know, pushing back against feminism that leaves Indigenous women out of the conversation. And yeah, that was a really great one. Again, I think that this entire book does a good job of bringing in a lot of minority voices, and this was, you know, one that talks about that very thing, about how feminism usually leaves out minority women. And, you know, there obviously were people back in those days who were, you know, fighting against that, even if they were lesser known. But yeah, we also end up with a few more authors that I was familiar with, although I haven't read from any of them before. But this includes Bell Hooks, who wrote an essay called Ending Female Sexual Oppression, and then an excerpt from The Mother's Tongue by Ursula K. Le Guin. And yeah, those were both very interesting. Both are authors that I want to read from. But yeah, that is basically this book of women's liberation. This entire book was very informative, very intriguing. I think it was the perfect start to this project. I think it gave me like the much needed like background of how different people view different topics. And considering I'm going in to this reading guide, obviously it's all going to be from my own perspective, my own opinions on these different books, but I feel like making like this book and this page in itself as part one of this video was very helpful for me, and I'm glad to like have the context before going into the next one. And again, I have already started working on the next page in this project, and yeah, I think there's a lot of similarities, because the next section is fundamental feminist writings, or feminist nonfiction. Yeah, fundamental feminist nonfiction, I think is what it's titled. But because those books are obviously talking about many different subjects, like the fundamentals of feminism, I feel like women's liberation was like the perfect place to begin, to have sort of like laying the groundwork, I suppose. So yeah, I'm very glad to have read it. It obviously introduced me to a lot of different authors who I probably wouldn't have picked up before. But yeah, this book did take me quite a long time to read. It is over 600 pages long, and it's very dense. It's a very dense nonfiction. It's not one where I could just like sit down and read like a whole bunch of it all at once, because they're essays, they're speeches and excerpts and stuff. So it's like I wanted to savor each one, so I would just like read one essay and then take a bit of a break and then read the next thing. So I'm glad to actually be done with this, just because I feel like it was so dense. And you know, I will say that since starting the second page, I have made progress a lot faster, because they're not so dense. They're still nonfiction books, but they're not as dense. I don't know how to describe it. There's a difference. I don't know. And we're at the end of the video. That is pretty much what I wanted to talk about. Hopefully one day in the future I will actually get to read the book by Rosemary Tong, but that day is not today. I definitely don't have $50 to drop on the book, but yeah, I'm glad to have started this project. I'm glad to have finally sat down and filmed this video. It was one I've been putting off for a while, but I hope you all are as excited about this project as I am. I hope that you continue to stick around and watch the rest of this project. Yeah, so if you liked this, don't forget to leave a like, subscribe, maybe turn on the bell notification so you get notified when the next video on this project drops. I don't know. Yeah, leave a comment about your favorite feminist book and all that. And yeah, again, my Patreon, link in the description. If you can, check it out. But yeah, thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you all in the next video. Bye!